Sometimes I think our greatest blessings come from the hardest things we experience in life, our greatest challenges. And I've been blessed with many difficult things in my life that have taught me how to be resilient and how to overcome and be a survivor. And many of my viewers are similar in story, a lot of hardships, a lot of difficulties, experiencing the depths of pain from, family betrayals and many difficult life circumstances. And the beauty in going through these hardships is it enables us to have an understanding on a deeper level for those that are going through similar experiences. We can understand and have a compassion that is deeper. We can recognize signs and patterns and relate to many varieties of people in a lot of different circumstances because of the hardships we've been through. And so when I'm asked to come speak, public speak, or be part of a project as an expert, they're asking me to come not as an expert because of qualifications and degrees and certificates and accolades. I'm an expert at being a survivor, and I've survived domestic violence, I've survived narcissistic abuse and family abuse, I've survived a lot of different corruption, and so my expertise is really on a personal level. So please know that what I'm about to speak on today, I'm sharing knowledge on a personal level as an expert survivor. And I'm going to be talking today about the connection between probate case fraud, inheritance theft, and how the smear campaign, the isolation, the efforts to make us homeless and jobless are so interconnected to what's going on in that court case to make it successful so that they can take from the beneficiary or the trustee, have the trustee removed. And though I have experience as a paralegal and a court case manager, deputy clerk in probate court, I'm not going to be speaking from that perspective, nor am I going to be going through, the case progression of a probate case or any of the legalities related to that. And I would encourage you, if anything that I'm saying resonates with your story, if you think inheritance theft or financial fraud, disability fraud, any of those kind of interconnected financial crimes are part of your story, please go consult an attorney. They've spent a lot of years getting their qualifications, their degree, and can guide you through that process appropriately. I'm here to just connect the targeting perspective as a targeted individual with what's happening to us and why they're smearing us and isolating us and trying to destroy every area of our life in order to accomplish certain things in that probate court, whether the cases involve guardianship, conservatorship, if it's a power of attorney situation, a mental health situation, an estate case, a contested will, a trust, whatever they're doing on the probate end, how it correlates to those of us that are being targeted and being stolen from in a legal way by them utilizing the court system to do so and making it look as if what they're doing is justified. And so failure to notify is a big part of the process. So they're going to say things like, we notified the targeted individual of the hearings, they just didn't show up. They don't care about this case. They're not responsible enough to even come to the hearings. Clearly, they're not responsible enough to handle, inheritance funds or property. And they're gonna play the game of, yeah, we served them and they never served you, or they're mailing to a false address. They provided a false address to the court. It may even get to the point where the court asks them to publish in the local newspaper, so they'll publish knowing that the targeted individual is never gonna see it, or they'll publish in a jurisdiction that's different from where the targeted individual lives. And meanwhile, they know exactly where to find the targeted individual because they're stalking them. They know every move they make. They know how to get in contact with them, but they're going to tell the courts you know, we serve them, they just didn't show up, or we can't find them. They're homeless, we can't locate them, which would explain in the targeting why they're trying to make the person appear unstable, unemployed, you know, riddled with drug addiction, homeless, because then they can go to the court and say, yeah, we just can't find them. They're MIA, they're living this wild, erratic lifestyle, and we just need to proceed with this case as is without them. There's going to be the false claims. So they're going to make allegations that, you know, this beneficiary or this trustee is being investigated for crimes. Meanwhile, they're the ones that made the reports and are trying to get them investigated for crimes with false evidence, false reports, obstruction of justice efforts. They're going to make claims of drug addiction. Yeah, the beneficiary is so unstable and riddled with addiction, they can't even show up to these hearings. You know, their testimony would be not credible. They couldn't handle funds because they're going to spend them all on their substance use. They're going to make all kinds of false claims. They may say that the beneficiary is sick, you know, on their deathbed, or, you know, has incapacitating mental illnesses and isn't coherent enough to even attend court. They're going to get as much narrative as possible. You know, they couldn't hold a job, they're not stable. Meanwhile, we got them fired from their job. They're not going to tell the full story, but it's important to understand what they're telling the court and what they're doing behind the scenes to manipulate the situation to match. So if family members have told the court, yeah, they're homeless, they've got to make that a reality. Or if they've said, yeah, they're a substance user, they certainly can't have you looking healthy and fine in public or on social media. They need you to be isolated. They need you to be in hermit mode so nobody can see that you're healthy and functioning. You can't be going to work every day. They need to do everything they can to make that narrative match because they're taking a huge risk by lying to the court. False records. This is where we're going to start to see, you know, manipulated medical records, manipulated mental health records, false testimony. Yeah, this person is so sick and it has A, B, and C diseases and is not expected to live much longer. Or, you know, they're going to have false records of mental health conditions, or they may even go so far as to create them by trying to get the victim, the targeted individual, evaluated to create that paper trail, to create the legal paper trail with criminal investigations and charges, with medical records, with mental health records. If there isn't evidence, if there isn't dirt in existence, they will make it into existence. And then you'll get the false testimony. And these could be paid actors, you know, people who've been bribed that they're going to get a portion of that inheritance or the sale of a property proceeds once the case is concluded, if they will get on the stand and perjure and lie about the beneficiary. Oh yeah, they're erratic and they're bad with money and they're riddled with addiction and they're, you know, committing fraud and they should be investigated and they're a terrible person. And these could be strangers, these could be people you haven't talked to in years, you know, since you were a child, people who have no direct knowledge of you. Or on the very painful end, it can be family members that are willing to sell you down the river, sacrifice you, destroy the relationship for financial gain on their part. And they'll say whatever they need to on that stand to discredit the beneficiary or trustee, to make them look like it would be hazardous to give them their allotment or their inheritance because they're going to blow it all on drugs, they're going to, you know, gamble it away, they're homeless, they're jobless, why would we give them money? You know, they're clearly not a stable person. Trustee removal is when they're asking for a trustee to be removed for purposes of fraud. And this is where you're going to see the efforts to paint a narrative that that trustee is committing fraud, you know, falsifying activity online, falsifying documents, trying to paint a narrative that this trustee can't be trusted because they're engaging in all these nefarious acts of which aren't real, but they're creating, again, fabricated evidence to make it look real. The goal is to make the trustee or beneficiary be deemed incapacitated. They're just so sick. They're dying of these diseases. They're so mentally ill. They're incapacitated and can't make decisions. And this is where you'll see petitions for mental health commitment also in the probate courts, petitions for guardianship, conservatorship, false power of attorneys, people seeking to take control solely for financial gain. So if you have, a family member who you don't speak to, but has in a hidden court case behind the scenes sought conservatorship over someone so they can control their assets, pretty clear red flag, pretty clear fraud case there. It's troubling that the family members will say they can't find the individual, yet they know so much about what's going on in their life. Well, what they know is the false narrative they're painting and what they're gleaning from stalking them. So we had the POAs, the conservatorships, the guardianships, and this is a stripping of someone's rights and liberties and freedoms, their protections, in such a gross and negligent way. And this casts a victim into a light, into a narrative, into a character or storyline that will follow them and is very hard to unravel and get out of, and is just such a gross misuse of the judicial system to achieve this in order to take what belongs to someone else. And when you've been through this level of betrayal by a family member, by a loved one, it is such a deep pain. But those of us who've been through it can understand and connect to those who've been through it also in a different way than others could, which is a blessing. False claim for spousal election. This is where they're going to put you in false marriages. You may have a false death certificate. You may be dead on paper. You may have a spouse you don't know about on paper, so that the person that they're working with, who's acting as your spouse, can come and take over and take those proceeds. And, in honey trap situations where they're partnering with somebody who's pretending to be in a relationship with you, trying to get you to marry them, it's much easier for them to take out life insurance policies, to engage in these situations as a pretend spouse with a fake marriage. And unfortunately, that's part of some of our stories. And really, the goal is, ta-da, we've legally stolen this inheritance, this property, this trust fund. We have managed to get control legally through a conservatorship, or we've removed the trustee. We've, removed the agent. We have managed to legally, through the court system, through the judicial system, achieve this theft. And it's really clever because it's easy to mask this theft. And the sad part is often the person who's really supposed to be receiving the proceeds doesn't even know this is going on, because they're over here being gang stalked, being targeted, having their name dragged through the mud, through the smear campaign, the lies, telling horrible stories that, we're drug addicts, we're prostituting ourselves, we're homeless, we're mentally unstable, we're volatile, we're aggressive, we're a threat to society, all the typical narrative. So we're surviving over here, trying to figure out where we're going to live, how we're going to eat, how we're going to get a new job, because they've ruined that. Nobody wants to talk to us. We're completely isolated. A whole community knows that this hidden court case is going on because they're providing false testimony, hiding documents and mail from us, making sure that they keep their pact to keep this hidden court case a secret. All the conspirators working together in this large RICO scam, this large fraud, and the poor victim doesn't even know they're being robbed blind. And really, it's stealing from the dead. When a deceased leaves something for someone, they've worked hard for what they're leaving behind, and to not honor the wishes of the deceased and to feel entitled that, no, I'm more deserving, I'm going to take control of this situation and utilize the judicial system to my benefit, to fill my pockets because I feel more worthy or I feel more entitled than the rightful heir. And so if this is potentially part of your story, And it's not in all targeted individual cases. You know, each case is unique and is being done for different purposes. It may simply just be discrimination or jealousy or corruption. But if this is part of your story, please go consult with an attorney that specializes in this type of case type and seek help, because it is a lot of unraveling to get to the bottom of the fraud that's been committed. You know, and you can take your ID and go to court, you know, the court system in the area that you think a case may be happening. Oftentimes they can't release information over the phone, so you need to go in person and prove your identity to see if there's a hidden case in existence. And sometimes they'll be so clever that they'll, you know, have these case hearings in a former last name or a maiden name, prior to adoption name, so that you can't get information on the case even with your valid ID. They intentionally will disguise the case name so that you cannot find it. And, you know, to those of us who've been through this, please don't lose hope. Please don't stop pushing forward and enduring and fighting. It's such a painful betrayal to know that, you know, the people you loved and thought loved you were willing to forfeit all of that for financial gain. And the beauty in going through such a painful experience is you can support and relate to others who have been through similar betrayal.